So friends, our first talk will be Sri Krishna on Yoga and Bhakti by Swami Atmarupananda.
So greetings again. Welcome back to our afternoon session, afternoon here, other times of day or night where you are. So let me begin with a chant. Om Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. We salute that supremely blissful Madhava, Krishna, by whose grace the mute are made eloquent and the lame are enabled to cross over mountains. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So, in the first session, I spoke about the connection between knowledge and karma, and why it is that Sri Krishna begins by teaching the knowledge of the self, even though the apparent aim is to get Arjuna back on his feet in order to engage in battle. Of course, there was a higher aim, and that was to lead Arjuna to deep spiritual experience, understanding, and experience. But the immediate aim was to get him engaged in battle. He who had lost his heart and lost the ability to stand and fight, he who had collapsed in his chariot. And in the second session, we talked about the secret of work itself, non-attachment and motiveless action, and how that motiveless action only comes by refining our motives until we can get to the point where we need no motive other than just the desire for freedom, where freedom itself means freedom from all motive, freedom from all sankalpa, freedom from all intention, freedom from all imagination, freedom from plans. Swami Vivekananda said to his sister Nivedita, who, because of her brilliant mind and her creative mind and her tremendous capacity for work and her commitment to serving others, she had many plans for her work. And Swami Vivekananda told her that that religion was never taught in the West by planners. There were only a few Catholic saints who had no plans, who really understood religion. And so again, that idea of being without plans, working without intention, that again, as I tried to explain in my last session, that comes through refining our motivation. We can't just say, well, I'm not going to plan anything, and lead an aimless, wandering, purposeless life. That comes as the fruit of a great intentionality, but refining our intentions until finally just the intention of freedom itself becomes enough. And then that takes us finally to the point where we have no motivation at all. We work, but we don't work. Either from the standpoint of knowledge, we see that the body and mind work under the impulsion of nature, and I have nothing to do with it. Or we see that it's God who moves the body and mind, and I am completely surrendered. I'm not the doer. As Swami Ramakrishnananda said, if the fountain pen could think, the fountain pen might think. Or nowadays, no one uses a fountain pen, so the ballpoint pen. The ballpoint pen might think that I have written so many wonderful letters. I've composed some poems, beautiful poems, which people appreciate. I've written a few books. I'm really quite well known in the world. Oh no, the pen was just in the hand of the author. The credit goes to the author. The pen, if it had ego awareness, it might think that. The same is true for us. We think that we do. We think that we create. We think that we accomplish. Uh, Actually, we don't do any of that. It's the ego which is the imposter, taking credit for that which really we are not responsible for. Some of you have heard me speak on this theme before. It's an important theme. It's even if you've heard it before, it's worth our going over it again. And some of you, of course, have not heard me say it. And that is that we don't really know how we do anything. We don't know how we do anything, and yet we think we are doing things. I think in ignorance, I think I'm going to speak now about karma yoga in the Gita. Do I know how to speak? No, I don't. Neither do you. You may think you do. You may think that it seems that I know how to speak. I don't, and you don't know. The physiologist, the anatomist, the neurophysiologist, they don't know either. I'm speaking, but do you know how many subtle movements are necessary for that to happen? Movements of the tongue, movements of the lips, control and regulation of the breath, the vibration of the vocal cords, all of that, and then the ideas translated into language, putting the sentences together, constructing phrases as thoughts come into the mind and turn into language and come out of the mouth. Just to think about it makes you dizzy and unable to speak. So I don't know how I do it. You don't know how you do it. It happens. And yet, in my foolishness, I say, I'm going to give a class on the Gita, on karma yoga. Something as simple as walking across the room here. I say, I'm going to walk over to the other room and get a glass of water. I don't know how I walk, nor do you know how you walk. It happens, yes. And the idea arises, I'm going to walk, and then I find myself walking, but how you do it, you don't know. How many muscular contractions and relaxations are going on as we walk, the balancing of the body so that I can stand up without falling over from imbalance. The movement, all of that is so complicated. The nervous impulses that are going into making the body move, we don't know how we do it. We have some vague idea, I'm going to walk, and I find that this body is moving across the room. And yet in my stupidity, it's not just foolishness, it's stupidity. I say, I'm going to walk over to the other room. I'm not doing it. It's happening. And so with all of our actions, we take credit for them. And as that's the imposter ego saying that I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And as long as I take credit for things, and not just publicly, but even in my own half-conscious thinking I am doing something, I will get the credit and the blame for it, which is karma. I will get the results of what I'm doing, which is karma. And so in the secret of the work, which I dealt with in the second section is non-attachment and motiveless action, which means the body and mind begin to act in their natural way through the impulses of Prakriti according to the Jnani, or through the will of God according to the Bhakta. So now I want to move to yoga, Raja Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, and their participation or their part to play in the path of karma yoga. And Sri Krishna develops both of these very beautifully. Yoga, again, yoga in the Gita most often refers to karma yoga. When Sri Krishna speaks about yoga, he speaks sometimes about Sankhya and yoga in the same phrase. Either by Sankhya or by yoga, one can attain to the highest, he says. And so by Sankhya, he means the path of knowledge, and by yoga, he usually means karma. But in chapter 6, yoga means the path of meditation, the path of Raja Yoga. And so what does meditation have to do with karma yoga? I'll approach it from two different standpoints. First, let me take the first 4 verses of chapter 6 and what Sri Krishna says. He says in the first verse, Anashritya karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sasanyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyaha. I won't go into a detailed explanation of any of these 4 verses because that would take too much time. But here he says, one who performs his duty without leaning on the fruits of action, that is, without depending on the fruits of action. I'm doing it because I want to get that from what I'm doing. One who doesn't do that, one who performs his work without being attached to the fruits of the action, such a one is a renouncer of action, a sannyasi, one who has renounced action, as well as one who is steadfast of mind. Steadfast of mind, what he calls yogi. He is a yogi, meaning one who is steadfast of mind. So here a yogi means not a karma yogi, it means one whose mind is under control. So one who performs his duty without leaning on the fruit of action, without depending on the fruit of action, such a one is a renouncer of action, a sannyasi, and such a one also is a yogi, one whose mind is under control. Not one who is without fire. I won't go into the explanation of that. That's a traditional idea, nor one who is without action. So in essence, for us right now, the important part is that one who performs his duty without attachment to the fruits of action, such a one is of steadfast mind. And so that ability to do that is what prepares the mind for deeper meditation, is what Sri Krishna is saying. And the second verse, yam sanyasam iti prahur yogam tam vidhi pandava nah sanyastaka sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. So know that to be devotion to action, which is called renunciation, O Arjuna. For none becomes a devotee to action without forsaking sankalpa. So what's important to us here in this verse, and I realize the verses are richer, more complex than what I'm explaining, but I'm explaining the part of the verses which pertain to the connection between karma yoga and Raja Yoga. So here, none becomes a devotee to action without forsaking sankalpa. Here, sankalpa means the intentionality, the planning, the thinking about, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I want this, I want that, my imaginations, all of that mental activity that's going on that occupies us most of the time. Our minds are filled with plans and activities and imaginations and projections and all of those things. All of that here goes into the word sankalpa. So none becomes a devotee of action without forsaking that. That is what we do in meditation. So through learning devoted action, mindfulness in action, and working not for the fruits of action, but just paying attention to what I'm doing and doing it in one way is doing it as an offering to God, or doing it unselfishly. Then I am I'm controlling the sankalpas which are normally arise in the mind. Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I'd like to have this, like to have that, what about this, what about that? All of this mental noise is going on all of the time. Through karma yoga also, I bring that daydreaming tendency of the mind and the scheming tendency of the mind, I bring it under control because I'm in the here and now. In karma yoga, we learn to bring the mind into the here and now. I'm doing this. Once in I believe it was 1972, I was living in the Ganges Monastery in Michigan under Swami Bhashyanandaji. And I had worked very hard that summer on the fruit farm that we had in those days in Ganges. And in recognition of that, Swami Bhashananji wanted to send me to for a vacation, the only vacation I ever had in Ganges. He sent me to Seattle and to Portland to see Swami Vividishananda, the great disciple of Swami Brahmananda, and Swami Aseshananda, the great disciple of Holy Mother. So when I was in Portland, at the end of my stay, Swami Aseshananda said, "You're leaving tomorrow, which is Saturday. Why don't you stay until after Sunday so that you can hear the Sunday talk?" And I said, "I would love to, Swami, but Swami Bhashananda told me to come back Saturday." He said, "Okay, I will call him and talk to him." So he tried, that was in the morning on Friday, he tried to call him and he couldn't get the Swami. And a little later he tried to call again, he couldn't get him. A little later he called again. Then by that time it was time for him to do the puja. And I said, "Maharaj, don't worry about it. It's time for your puja. It's okay. I would love to stay, but if I can't, that's okay. I don't want it to get in the way of your puja." He said, "No, I've taken a decision to do this. I'll put off the puja because until this is done, I can't take up another work." And so he called. Of course, they would have obviously coming into that if the Swami never answered, but he was intent on trying to get the Swami as much as he could, and he wasn't going to go on to something else until that was accomplished. And I learned from that focus on the task in hand. That whatever you have in hand, for the moment, that's the most important thing in the world. If I'm giving this class and I'm thinking about 1,000 other things, then I'm not giving proper attention to the class. So again, that's the connection with Raja Yoga, the control of the daydreaming tendency of the mind. And then verse 3, he says, "Arurukshor muner yogam karma karanam uchyate yogarudhasya tasyaiva shama karanam uchyate." For the person of meditation, wishing to attain purification of heart, leading to concentration, work is said to be the way. So work, Sri Krishna says, is the way to bring the mind to a state of calmness so that you develop the power of meditation. And then he says, for one who has attained such concentration, inaction is said to be the way. Inaction is said to be the way for the person. Shama is the word here. Shama karanamuchyate. Stillness is said to be the way for one who has attained to concentration. So that has to be understood more deeply than just, it means, okay, you give up all action and you don't do anything, you just sit there still. As we get from a study of the whole Gita, what Sri Krishna means is that karma yoga, it teaches us to control the mind, control the body and the mind, to remain in the present moment. And then that prepares the mind so that we can enter meditation. When we enter meditation, then he says stillness, shama. Stillness is the means. And so stilling the mind. Now that doesn't mean that you don't do anything, because he's already told us in chapter 3 that nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatutishtatya karmapet. No one, even for a moment, remains without action. And so it means that the emphasis becomes, once you've attained to the power of concentration, then when you're meditating, then you still the mind. That's all you have to do, is to still the mind. When you're not in meditation, yes, you continue karma yoga in whatever it is that you're doing. But in the time of meditation, stillness is the means. But even there, karma yoga is important. Again, right now I'm speaking about the theme of the intersection between karma and yoga and Raja Yoga, the path of meditation. The path of meditation should also be performed from the standpoint of karma yoga, whether you think about karma yoga or not. You may think, I'm just a Raja Yogi, that's all I want to practice. Even then, you should bring in the element of karma yoga, which is non-attachment. Because one of the great problems in meditation is sitting there and meditating and thinking, am I getting anywhere? Are we there yet? Are we there yet, Mama? Are we there yet, Daddy? The tendency that little kids have in the car when they're going somewhere, and the trip seems so long to little kids, even if it's just from one side of town to the other. And so in meditation, we do the same thing. Am I there yet? Am I there yet? Is something going to happen? Is something going to happen? I don't feel anything. I don't feel anything. No, forget about all of that. Give up the anticipation of the fruits of action. Just put your mind in the meditation. Don't think about the fruits of meditation. When you can do that, put your mind in the meditation without any thought of the fruits and keep your mind steady there. The fruits will come of themselves. They don't come because you're thinking, when am I going to get something out of this? When am I going to get something out of this? Just as when you're a little kid in the car and you ask your mother, Mama, are we there yet? Are we there yet? That doesn't get you there any faster. The car is still going to take its own time. You're asking these questions and bothering your mother doesn't help the process at all. In fact, it just bothers your mother. And so with meditation, we have to learn to be still and just focus on doing what we're doing. If we're doing japa, it's just Om, 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 Om. The mind runs away, no. Om, Om, Om. The mind runs away, Om, Om. The thought comes, oh, I've been doing this for a long time and still I'm not getting anything. What's happening? No, push that out. Just Om, Om, Om. So you give up the thought of the fruits of your meditation. So all of these are ways in which meditation and the path of karma yoga intersect. One other way, let me say, one other area, and that is that work helps lead to the control of the senses, because in focusing your mind on what you're doing, you are bringing the senses under greater control. Work helps in developing concentration, because as you pay attention to that which you're doing, you develop the art, which you're trying to do also in meditation. You develop the art of keeping your mind on the task at hand. When the mind runs away, you bring it back to what you're doing. Even something simple like washing dishes. One of the wonderful things about karma yoga is that you find every task, if you pay attention to it and aren't thinking about the past and future, but you pay attention to what you're doing in the present moment, every task brings you a sense of joy. Every task brings a sense of joy. You begin to see depth in everything that you do. And so in that way also, karma yoga helps in meditation. It brings control over the senses by paying attention. It brings calmness to the mind. It brings the mind into the present moment, which is the only moment in which meditation actually happens. And so in all of these ways, it helps. Finally, on this part of the topic, and then I'll go to Bhakti, Swami Vivekananda said that he wanted his followers to emphasize work rather than traditional tapasya. He didn't mean meditation. He wanted his followers to practice intense meditation. But rather than practicing austerities of fasting and vigils and all of that, he wanted their energy to go into work. That means that he wanted work to serve the purpose among his followers that tapasya, spiritual austerities, serve for traditional spiritual aspirants. That means that work can do the same thing that tapasya does, that work is a type of tapasya. And so for work to do what tapasya does, we have to do work in such a way that it is tapasya. And tapasya, as Shankaracharya defines it, means primarily concentration of the mind. And so learning to do work so that we have concentration of mind. So now, let's see, I need to check again to see how long this session goes. Oh, it's only to 3:05. So I only have 10 more minutes before question and answer. So let me move on to Bhakti and Karma Yoga. This is a very rich field, extremely rich field. Bhakti provides motivation. Now, some people don't have bhakti and they don't want bhakti, and that's okay. If you don't have bhakti, you don't want bhakti. then you can follow karma yoga as a path in itself, or you can follow jnana yoga combined with karma yoga. But for those who have or want to have devotion, then it provides a motivation in karma yoga through bhakti. Your motivation is service and love for God. Everything that you do it out of love for God. Brother Lawrence, the great Carmelite lay brother, whose little book of advice is called The Practice of the Presence of God, a highly recommended, small, beautiful spiritual text. He said that by late in his life, everything he did was motivated by the love of God. Even picking up a straw from the ground, he did out of love for God. And so that we see provided the motivation for action. I do what I do out of love for you, O Lord, not because I want this, not because I want that, not because I'm trying to impress these people or I'm trying to impress those people, not because I'm too restless to sit still, so I got to do something just to do something. I'm just got to expend all of this energy I feel. No, I'm doing it because I love you. And that is as I said, in karma yoga, we can't just give up all motivation and be motiveless. No, we have to have a motivation that is higher to replace lower motivation. And so love of God is a tremendous motivation. Bhakti also provides joy in work, because if I'm doing it out of love, just as a mother, when she's doing something for her child out of love, she enjoys doing what she's doing. When a couple, one person loves another person in an ordinary human way, and when you do something for the person that you love, you don't think that, oh God, I've got to go do something for that person. No, you feel, I want to do something. And so bhakti provides motivation, a beautiful motivation. It provides joy in the midst of work. Holy Mother used to say that I pray to the Lord that as long as I live, so long may I work, because work is a delicious thing. She says, work is a delicious thing. I want to work as long as I am able to work. Think of that. Holy Mother, whose work was so hard, who did work so hard, and who had what would normally be considered such unpleasant work to do oftentimes, managing a huge and extremely difficult household. Half of the people she managed around her were unstable people, difficult people, contrary people. And yet she said, as long as I live, so long may I work. Showing that in the midst of even the difficult circumstances Holy Mother lived in the midst of, she found great joy in work. And I've been reading for some time reminiscences of Holy Mother in Bengali, where there are many more reminiscences than what we have in English. And one of the things I get, which I didn't get from the various English books I've read about Holy Mother, is this sense that she was always so joyful, always like a little girl, always ready to laugh, always full of happiness and joy. It's a wonderful thing to see that, read that in the reminiscences. And that was in the midst of difficult circumstances. So Bhakti provides us with that. And offering our work also helps us to do our work well. If I'm going to do my work as an offering to God, then I don't think, it's all right, that's good enough. That's good enough. Just get it done somehow and get on with it. That's all you need to do. No, I'm doing this as an offering, so I do it well. I do it with attention because I'm doing it for you. It's an offering of my love, and so I want to do it well. So bhakti is one of the great aids in karma yoga. If bhakti, again, forms part of our temperament and part of our spiritual path, either potentially or actually. Most of us don't start with bhakti. It's something we develop because we intend to develop, because we like the idea and feel that I wish I had devotion. And so that's all we need. And if we develop that, we find that that is a great way to develop bhakti. So let me go through a few verses in chapter 9 There are verses in chapter 12 also I would do if there were time. There are many chapters in the Gita that deal with work and devotion, but let me just read some. And these are very famous verses, and so most of you have heard them. But as I said in the beginning of the last session, repetition in spiritual life is extremely important. So no, I won't start there because it's not time. I'll have to shorten this a little bit. Let me go to verse 24, 9:24. Aham hi sarva yajnanam bhokta cha prabhureva cha natu mam abhijananti tattvena tascha vantite. I alone am the enjoyer and the Lord of all sacrifice. In the Hindu view from the Vedic times, the whole of this universe is a grand sacrifice where everything is being offered into everything else, and ultimately everything is being offered back into God. God offers it into the unity of God's being is offered in sacrifice into multiplicity, and multiplicity is being offered back in sacrifice into unity. And every part of this universe is sacrificial. Everything is being offered into everything else. The eater becomes the food of another eater, which becomes the food of another eater, etc. So for I alone am the enjoyer and Lord of all of the sacrifices, but because they do not know me in reality, they return to the mortal world. So God is the ultimate bhokta. And so we can offer all of our enjoyments when we eat food or do anything that we see a beautiful sight. We offer that back to God, who is the ultimate enjoyer. It doesn't mean that as we're eating we try not to taste it. No, it means that it's not for me. It goes through me to God, who is the enjoyer of everything. And so in that way, everything that I do becomes an offering to God. In this context, I remember our devotee in San Diego, whom a few of you would have known, Clemmy, wonderful Belgian French lady, who died at the age of 102 several years ago. A very saintly woman. But she would offer everything to Holy Mother, who was her Ishta. And she would see a sunset. She was a great enjoyer of anything beautiful, whether it was human-made things or natural things. She'd say, "Oh, Mother, look at the beautiful sunset. Look, Mother, at the beautiful sunset." So she was offering the beauty of the sunset to Mother. "Oh, Mother, taste this ice cream. Such a beautiful ice cream." Everything that she did, everything that she enjoyed, was an offering to the enjoyer, who was the Holy Mother. And let me do just a little bit more because time is up. Yeah, let me move to no. Where did that go now? Oh, 31, 32. Okay, here. Number 34. Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vaishyasi yukta tvaevam atmanam matparayanaha. Fill your mind with me. Be my devotee. Sacrifice unto me, Sri Krishna is saying, as the Lord. Bow down to me, thus having made your heart steadfast in me, taking me as the supreme goal, thou shalt come to me. Oh, here I missed one of the. Oh, this is, of course, another that verse is very important, which I just read, but I wanted to be sure I caught this other one, and then we'll open for questions with a short statement tying it all together. Fill your mind with me, be my devotee, as I just read. Sacrifice unto me, bow down to me. Thus, having made your heart steadfast in me, taking me as the supreme goal, thou shalt come to me. And so again, that all of your actions become dedicated to God. And so karma yoga becomes the yoga of worship. Every action is a worship of God. So that is karma yoga, but karma yoga from the standpoint of devotion. And the verse that I wanted to be sure to get, there's several beautiful verses in here, but that was 26. Patram pushpam phalam toyam yo me bhaktya prayachati taraham bhakthyupahritam ashnami prayatatmanaha. Whoever with devotion offers me a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, that I accept, the devout offering of the pure-minded, that is, of my pure-minded devotee. Whoever offers to me a leaf, a flower, a fruit, water. No, you don't have to offer gold and silver. You don't have to offer expensive things. You don't have to offer fine saris. If you have the money and want to offer that in a temple, fine, but that's not the point. The point is that you offer whatever it is that you have, you offer that with love. And God has made the promise that that offering I accept from my beloved devotee. And so the intersection of bhakti and karma comes when we begin to feel devotion for God. As a practice, we try to develop devotion and we think that I am doing my work as an offering to God. That is good. That is a practice. That's how we get established. But the time comes, as Brother Lawrence said, when everything I do, even picking up a straw from the ground, I do for the love of God. Then bhakti has arisen. Then bhakti has become fruitful. Then our work, every work becomes an offering of love to the beloved. And so let me just, in a short few sentences, and then I'll ask for questions, sum up what we've done so far today. That Sri Krishna begins his teaching of Arjuna with this teaching of the divinity of the self, that you are the deathless, you are the birthless, you are the eternal, you are all pervading, you are reality itself. There is no death for you. And so he gives Arjuna the standpoint from which he can face the challenges of life. There's a greater purpose behind that teaching, and that is enlightenment. That's the greatest purpose of that teaching. But Sri Krishna saw, and Swami Vivekananda saw, that this teaching would make a person a better and more effective person, even in the world. It would make Arjuna a better warrior so that he could stand up and do his fight. Swamiji said it would make a fisherman a better fisherman. Not just help him to realize eventually the self, here and now, the fisherman who's not even interested in realization, but wants to be a fisherman in order to carry on his work. It will make him a better fisherman. It will make a lawyer a better lawyer, a doctor a better doctor, a student a better student. And eventually, Swamiji says in the same passage, help them to realize the infinite. But even here and now, it will help. And so Sri Krishna teaches the knowledge of the self, both because it's true and because it is true, it will help you here and now with whatever you have to do, including the path of karma yoga, doing whatever action you have to do. And so he also taught the secret of work, which is non-attachment and going beyond all limited motivations, so that the goal of the karma yogi is complete freedom in the midst of action. Even when the body and mind are busily engaged in action, I'm completely free as the air, unbound by the action, unbound by longing or hankering, unbound by the feeling of being the doer, being the enjoyer. The body and mind, let them work. Either I am pure consciousness, unaffected by anything, everything happens within consciousness, it's the play within consciousness, but I am the consciousness itself. Or as Swami Atmarupananda has beautifully been explaining, I am the screen, not the movie. Then I'm free. Or God is the doer, and I am just the witness of the play of God. God is doing everything, and I am just the witness or the playmate. God making me play as He wants me to play, but I'm that also is not my doing. Yoga, it helps by bringing control of the senses, control of the mind, bringing calmness to the mind, ending that endless sankalpa of the mind. I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to get rid of this, I want to get rid of that, I want to solve this problem, I want to do that, I'm worried about what's happening tomorrow, I'm regretting what happened yesterday. All of that noise going on in the mind, bring it to an end with karma yoga. And then even when you are ready for deep meditation, even that do with the spirit of karma yoga. Do it as karma yoga, that I'm not constantly thinking, when am I going to get there? When am I going to get there? No, for me, it's just in the moment, doing what I do. And eventually that will lead to deep meditation, but that's not what I think about. For me, it's just the task at hand. And then through devotion, if I have a devotional temperament or if I want to develop one, then that brings great joy into work, because work is no longer a task. It's no longer something that has to be done. It's something that I do because I want to worship. And of course, not even that's a misstatement that I do. That sense goes, God does, but everything that happens is a worship of God. And so all of the yogas can be enhanced by karma yoga, and they can enhance karma yoga as well. So let me stop here and see what questions there are by this point.
Swami, if work itself is done in a meditative way, then what is the need or purpose for sitting down and stilling the mind?
Yes, a good question. And so there's not, it's not absolutely essential. Meditation is not essential for the spiritual aspirants. It's good and highly recommended for the vast majority of us. Most of us are greatly benefited by meditation, but it's not that everyone has to sit still in meditation. There are systems, even in India, where they don't stress meditation. They stress more service of God, service of humanity, rituals, and various other things, rather than sitting still in meditation. But meditation, again, is for most people, it's advisable because it's the one time in which we focus directly and concentratedly just on the mind itself. And since the mind is central to all of the yogas, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, all of the yogas are mental yogas. Every yoga is a mental yoga. And so meditation addresses the mind in itself. And so that's why for most people, it's highly recommended. And it's very beneficial. Most people would do well to practice meditation and would not do as well or as quickly if they gave it up. But it's not essential, no.
Swami, you mentioned action brings concentration of mind. Explain how the process of puja is a science of karma yoga in a very systematic way, awakening devotion and also knowledge.
Yes, puja is a wonderful tool, a spiritual tool. And by calling it a spiritual tool, I don't mean to sort of objectify it as something which is mechanical, but it is a wonderful spiritual tool. I did puja practically every day for about 11 years in San Diego, and it was one of the most helpful things I ever did in my spiritual life. And the reason for that is the puja is designed. I don't mean it's designed by committee, but it is a scientific procedure. Swami Hitananda, a great pujari of the order, who for many years was the head pujari at Belar Mutt, and a great spiritual soul that I knew. He told us in class at Training Center when he was teaching us puja, that the puja is a method for realizing Tattvamasi, thou art that, the essential dictum of non-dualism, Tattvamasi, thou art that. He showed how puja, first by purifying the elements and the surroundings of the puja, purifying one's body, and then through imagination in the process of puja, imagining oneself to be dissolved into pure consciousness, and then out of that consciousness, bringing the deity that's to be worshipped from within your own consciousness, bringing that through imagination and mantra out onto the altar, thinking that the deity is your own inner reality that you've objectified for the purpose of worship, then you worship it. That is a way of practicing Tattvamasi, thou art that, because what you're worshiping you have brought out from your own inner reality ritually. Puja is also very effective because it is karma, and it was traditionally understood to be karma. Karma, one of the meanings for karma in Hinduism is ritual. And so puja is ritual, and so it is karma. Karma has the broader meaning of all action, it has the narrow meaning of ritual. And so in puja, you are using your body, your speech, and your mind at the same time with concentration. If a teacher tells me, okay, Swami, you sit still now and think of nothing except for this one thing, that's hard to do. But if they say, okay, now do this action which has this meaning, and associated with it, there's this prayer which expresses the meaning, and then this imagination which pictures the meaning of it, then suddenly my whole being, physical, mental, and verbal, is involved in the same thing with concentration. So my whole being is engaged. And then the mind becomes concentrated very easily. And finally, let me say, and I know this is a long answer and we got other questions, but this is important. Finally, through puja, it's very easy to begin feeling that when you offer a flower, physically offering a flower to God, you begin to feel after some time that God is actually there receiving it. You may not yet have spiritual experience where you see God sitting on the altar visibly, but you feel it. You begin to feel that, no, Sri Ramakrishna is actually sitting here. Holy Mother and Swami Vivekananda are actually sitting here, and I'm actually offering them a flower, and they are receiving it. Finally, let me say that for someone like me who didn't grow up in the Hindu tradition, one of the great benefits for me, and this isn't necessary for Westerners, but it was helpful to me because I have become a monk of the order and am often asked to represent the order. It was through puja that the Hindu deities came alive and part of my mental universe. By making offerings to Ganesha, doing puja to Hanuman, doing puja to Durga and Kali. That awakened these images within my mental universe so that those mythological figures became part of my spiritual universe. So that's not necessary for anyone else, for anyone, but it was a great benefit for me being a person who identifies with the Hindu tradition.
Thank you. That was a beautiful answer, Swami. Which is the difference between Kriya Yoga meditation and Vedantic meditation? Is Kriya Yoga, can that be considered as a kind of Vedantic meditation?
Well, now by Kriya Yoga, there's Kriya Yoga in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and there's Kriya Yoga taught by the followers of Lahiri Mahashoy, including Paramahamsa Yogananda. So I'm assuming that you mean by Kriya Yoga the tradition coming down from Lahiri Mahashoy and Paramahamsa Yogananda. And that I have not studied. That, of course, as probably the questioner knows, one has to be initiated into that to know exactly what Kriya Yoga is. So I'm not authorized to speak on that because I don't know it. Kriya Yoga in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which is a different thing, that certainly is quite in harmony with Vedanta. But let me say this, I do know from what I've heard that certainly the Kriya Yoga of Lahiri Mahashoy and his followers is perfectly in tune with Vedanta, but it's a particular technique. And it may be a wonderful technique and an effective technique. I have no reason to think it's not. It's certainly in tune with Vedanta, but it is one particular technique. It's not, Vedanta is like a huge department store, and in the department store, there's a corner where there's a counter where Kriya Yoga is available, but the rest of the department store is still there. So it's like that.
Swami, you mentioned that if you don't want to do bhakti, perform bhakti, you can take the path of karma or Raja Yogas. However, in the bhakti schools, it is said in order to be with your choice of God, retain the subtle identity, and be liberated beyond the formless, you need to be able to practice bhakti. Your thoughts on this?
Yes, I know that that's taught, and I disagree with it. And the great majority of the Vedanta, the Hindu tradition, would disagree with that kind of. It's an example, and with all due respect to the schools that teach that, because I know the schools that do teach that sort of thing. I know many of the followers who are wonderful people. Some of them are saintly, very good people, but that itself is an example of the type of narrowness that comes into religions, where I follow a path, and then I begin to tell everybody that this path which I followed, it leads to God, and everybody should follow this path. No, that I will refuse to approve of that kind of statement from any religion, whether it's Christianity or the Vaishnavas or Shaivas or the Muslims or anyone else who say that one has to do this in order to attain to perfection. No, there are many paths leading to perfection. It's not just through bhakti. Bhakti is a wonderful path. Let people follow it. If you want to follow it, follow it. It will lead to liberation. There's no doubt about that. But those who say that you have to do that to get liberated, they are expressing a narrowness which I'll never condone.
Swami, each of us seem to be naturally predisposed to a certain kind of yoga over others. If so much is naturally driven, what effect does the illusory free will actually have?
Yes. Well, actually, the free will is, as Sri Ramakrishna explains, is really a misnomer. But we can't do without the feeling of free will right now also. So I won't go into the question of whether there is free will or whether there's not. Ultimately, we realize there's not really free will. But right now, we can't avoid feeling that we are free agents and acting as though we are. And so it's a practical part of our everyday life that we feel that we are free agents. Eventually, we find that we weren't. But when we find that we weren't, we understand it in a very different way from the way we would understand it now. If I think now that I'm not free and I have no free will, I'm going to misunderstand that statement. When I find that actually there was no free will, I understand it in a vast context where it doesn't make me feel like a slave, which is what I will feel if I do that now. So coming to the main part of the question, finding my path, as I said before, if we start with what we like in spiritual life, what appeals to us. Certainly, when we come to spiritual life, many of us find that, well, when I read a book on this yoga, I like that. I read a book on another yoga, I like that. I read a book on another yoga, I like that. But in time, allow yourself to do that. Allow yourself time to explore. But in time, you'll find that there's certain ideas that every time you come across them in whatever context, they appeal to you. And other ideas you may like, but they're not as meaningful. But there's certain things that always seem to be speaking directly to you. Take those up. Take up the things that you really like and that you consistently like and that seem to be speaking to you. Follow that. And then with time, if you follow that, you will be moving ahead. And as you move ahead, your path will become more clear to you, and you'll begin to see more what it is that is meant for you. So start with something. Start with something. Go forward. As Sri Ramakrishna said, and I'll end with this, Sri Ramakrishna said that if you're going on a trip to a distant city and say there is no internet, there is no Google Maps, and you don't have a physical map. If you sit in your room saying, "Well, I want to go from here in Dallas to San Francisco, but I don't know how to go," and you just think about, "Well, I'd like to go, but I don't know how," you're not going to get anywhere. But if you go out onto the street and ask somebody, "Do you know how to go towards San Francisco?" Somebody might say, "Well, turn right here, and then you go right over there, and then you get on the freeway, and then you can ask somebody else." Maybe the first person you ask gives you wrong instructions, but you'll meet somebody else who gives you correct instructions, and then you'll find your way. So start with what you like. And then your path will get clearer and you'll begin to understand in more detail what is meant for you.
Thank you, Swami.